Welcome to a March Madness edition of the Daily Deuce. I'm Gary Graves from just outside Louisville, Kentucky, home of the tournament-bound Louisville Cardinals, and in Maryland, not too far from College Park, home of the tournament-bound Maryland Terrapins men and women, John Webster. How you doing, Big John?
Hey man, I'm doing good, Gary. Everything's going well. Um, the really exciting time of the year for you and I. Tournament is here, March Madness. A lot of excitement on the women's side, a lot of excitement on the men's side. Playing games start on Tuesday. Hey man, what do you think, man? What do you think?
Well, just looking at the brackets and the seedings, I'll tell you, it's hard for me right now to argue against the hot teams, UCLA on the women's side, and especially Florida on the men's side, because to win that tournament and have like the number one overall seed, Auburn get knocked out in the semifinals. I mean, that just shows you again how strong the SEC was, at least the top half. But the tournament is won by teams playing their best ball at the best time of year. And right now, I like the momentum, for both of those. So you can write those predictions down if you so dare. I'll be happy to be surprised because, again, March Madness means surprises. But, right now, I'm one that's going with the hot hands.
Gary, help me understand something. SEC, help me do the math. 16 teams in the SEC, correct?
Correct.
And 14 of them made the tournament?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, in your mind, in Gary Gray's mind, how many of those 14 should make it to the Final Four in order for you to say it's successful?
I'm going to say two. Um, I think I think Florida and Auburn have to get there to make it legitimate to kind of show just how competitive at least it was in the upper echelon because I mean Florida beat some quality teams this year, including Auburn, I'm really impressed with what Golden has done there after coming over from San Francisco. And I covered him when he was coach there, and just a couple weeks later he got hired by Florida. And
Hmm.
just looking at what he did out there, and I'm not real surprised by how he's built that team. They are so much a team built in his image. They're fast, they can score. Walter Clayton, who nobody I assume heard about 3 weeks ago or really paid close attention to, is going to be someone that you're going to hear his name a lot over these next couple weeks and probably on NBA draft night in the lottery. I mean, I'm willing to go that far. And you know, to your point about how many teams got in or how many teams should make the Final Four, I do think that probably the two best teams should get there, especially given their seedings and the brackets that they're placed in. But in retrospect, John, 14 teams had no business getting in there, and you know, uh, I guess because most of my focus has been on the ACC entries, particularly one in Carolina Blue that I'm still scratching my head over with only one quad one win. Um, I guess it just helps to have friends in high places with that. But again, when you have this many teams, you're kind of locked. I think with getting the Power Four conference teams in there, and teams like George Mason, for example, that they came up as a runner up in their conference championship, and won 26 games. You can make a case for them, but unfortunately, it's a one bid league, and you get stacked with teams from the Big Ten and the SEC, and I guess to a different extent, the Big 12. And I
Hmm.
don't know if you really need that many because, if I'm West Virginia from the Big 12, I am royally ticked off to keep it clean because North Carolina got in and they didn't. And I'm still trying to understand how in the world that happened.
Well, you're closer to it than I am. Explain to our audience about this criteria and this committee that meets. How does that work? I mean, one of the things I think Cunningham and what's the other guy's name, Gill,
Gil.
said it was something about not just their quad ones, but the quad twos and quad threes played a role in it. Um, Explain how that works, Gary.
Okay. Ideally, how it works is that they take, the strength of schedule, non-conference, the strength of the conference in general, of course, head-to-head matches, and they didn't follow their own formula. Particularly, again, looking at North Carolina, and I was trying to find their record. I want to say they were something like 1-13 in quad against quad one opponents. Or
And what does quad one mean? What does
well,
quad one mean?
okay, I guess. The it's the upper division teams in the most competitive conferences. Again, like I said, the Power Four and maybe the Big East or so. Teams that have winning records or have come from conferences where most of the teams have winning records and have decent shots at making the tournament.
So
Um,
what's a quad two and what's a quad three?
Well, I'd say quad two would be the mid majors that we always talk about, the ones that, again, that second tier of conferences and teams that, again, might be the ones that they'll be ranked by in the Associated Press poll, but their overall strength of schedule, other than say their early season non-conference matches, games rather, against, like, say, a Kansas or a Duke or a UConn or something, depending on how they come out of that. I'll just say, you take a team like maybe VCU, that could be a win against them could be considered a quad one late in the season if they're ranked, but early on might be considered a quad two because, again, it's just outside that power four.
Mm-hmm.
Um, quad three is, like you say, the ones that you that you play to basically get playing time and a 30-point win
Mm-hmm.
over an overmatched team. But they really the factors that should matter, they didn't really follow in the case of UNC, and I think that will be something that everybody will point out, and probably rightfully so, especially if they get knocked out in the first round, because that was not a really good Carolina team by any stretch, and that was one that I just don't know how in the world it happened, other than say, maybe having like your university president or athletic director on the tournament selection committee, even though they tried to insist that his presence didn't have uh, a big a big effect on that. That it came down to everybody else voting, and I'm like, the cynic in me is kind of giving it the stink eye, because it's just not a good look.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. That helps.
I,
It helps me
I
definitely
hope
understand. I think
that
it.
that makes
Oh yeah,
sense.
it does. It does. Let's look a little bit deeper into the men's bracket. You got Duke playing in the East. They're the overall number two seed. I think a lot of them being overall number two is because Cooper Flag got injured this past weekend, the ACC tournament. What do you think happens with them? And how do you think Houston's going to do in the Midwest?
Ooh. Um, well, looking at that bracket, Houston, I'd say at first glance, well, I'll say Houston and in the Midwest and Auburn in the South, I'd say have probably the toughest early rounds to get through, because I'm looking at this and it's like, okay, they play SIU Edwardsville, 1 versus 16.
Mm-hmm.
Only two number 16 seeds have won, so that should work for them, especially
Mm-hmm.
considering how Houston plays defense. But then you get into the second round. Gonzaga and Georgia face off, and the winner of that game will meet Houston. Well, we've seen Gonzaga. They can score. They can rebound. That's a tough matchup, and they play in one of those conferences, outside the Power Four that I mentioned,
Hmm.
and they might not get the same kind of attention. But anybody that's followed college basketball for the last 15 years knows how good Gonzaga is, and knows that the Zags or the Bulldogs, along with St. Mary's, are like the class of that conference and can beat just about anybody on any night,
Hmm.
not just a good
Hmm.
night. And Gonzaga
Hmm.
has beaten Kentucky, for example, a couple of times, so nothing would surprise me about them. That's the game that they have to worry about. And you see Gonzaga seeded eighth against Georgia, another team that beat Kentucky, and I think they were the only other team that beat Florida
Hmm.
in the SEC. They're a scary team. They're playing their best ball at the right time of season. So, if they can get past this first weekend, of course, the matchup that everybody really is looking for in Houston's region might be the Elite Eight final if Clemson holds serve and gets through there. And that's one, if they can beat Clemson, which I think they can, because Kelvin Sampson has just built a team that I think they have threatened. They have gotten really, really close there, the last few years. And I think this might be the year that they finally take that next step and get to a Final Four. And I'm probably missing something if they've already made the Final Four a few years ago. I'd have to go back and look. But off the top of my head, I think this Houston team is built to make a really deep run, get there, and possibly give that school a national championship that they've often sought. And John, we can go back to the Elvin Hayes days, and Phi Slamma Jamma days, and talk about great teams that just didn't get over the top.
Didn't he make it one year when they beat Villanova? Didn't they beat Villanova one year to get there? Jay Wright was coaching. That was the year
Yeah,
Jay Wright went into that game and he had a bunch of injured players.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to remember. I think Kelvin Sampson did get there one of those years,
Yeah, and I think it
but I
was
can't remember.
before COVID. I think it was. I think it
Yeah,
was before
you're
COVID.
right. Yeah, you're right. And again, Kelvin Sampson, you can say whatever about
Mm.
some of his background, his checkered background, but much like Rick Pitino, he's a heck of a coach. He is a heck of a
Mm.
coach, and you figure coaches like him at some point will, you know, sometimes you luck into a championship and by winning it the year you're not supposed to. But this is one of
Mm.
those years that I'd say Houston and Auburn have the potential to win it. I think Florida right now again is the team to beat because of just how strong they are and how strongly they're playing at this point. To go to the South and talk about Auburn, and this is the region where for two days I've been trying to figure out. Louisville is in that region. They are seeded eight. They finished runner up to Duke in the regular season and lost to them in the conference championship game. I would have thought that they would be like on that top four line, but they're seeded eight and have to face Creighton, a dangerous team by any stretch. And their second round reward, if you will, is facing Auburn. And Auburn, if you're Bruce Pearl or Janai Broom, you're wondering, why in the world are we facing a team like Louisville in the second round? Something about that seeding is still kind of curious to me. And the only thing, John, I can think of off the top of my head is that they penalized Louisville in a sense for the ACC being so weak. And I figure if you're still the number two in a weak conference, and you gave Duke a pretty good game early in the season. Both times they faced them, they lost, but they were competitive. I didn't get a chance to see the ACC final, so I can't really speak to what happened there. But the only thing I can say about that is that they really threw threw Louisville under the bus because of that. But at the same time, if you talk about the ACC being so weak, why did you let North Carolina in? Explain that.
as we come full circle. Hey, real quick before we move to the women, how far does that College Park team on your hat, on your cap, how far do they go in the men's bracket?
In the men's bracket, I think they're good enough to honestly, John, get out of the first weekend because you know the way that they lost in the Big Ten tournament, just like allowing a guy to go to do a straight line drive almost the full length of the court, speaks to me of a communications problem that. Yeah, I mean that's the only thing that I can really think of for how they lost that game after taking a lead. I can guarantee that they're watching that film and just saying, we're not going to let this stuff happen again. I think a loss like that can kind of motivate Maryland to really just kind of dial in. At least I'm going to say I hope that's the case because we've also seen games this year where they, like Saturday, where they just have brain lock and or don't seem dialed in. But you get to this point, you hope that that's enough to light a fire underneath them to stay locked in for 40 minutes. If you've got a lead, build on the lead, maintain the lead, and if it's a close game, if you fight back and you get the lead, find a way to preserve it. Don't leave anything else up to chance, and don't assume that a team might have a timeout or something, which it appears to be the case at the end of that game, that Michigan game. But I think they're good
Well,
enough to get out of the first weekend.
okay. That puts them in what, Sweet 16 then, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's talk about this women's bracket, man. Your top four seeds, number one seeds, UCLA, almost said UCLA, South Carolina, USC, and Texas. UConn is a number two. Talk to me.
Okay. All right. No problem with UCLA as the number one overall seed. Actually, I have no problems with UCLA, USC, and SC being number one seeds. Texas, I'm a little perplexed by that one as opposed to UConn. And I, if I feel like Gino Auriemma, gets everything anyway, but he's got a legitimate case that they probably should have been one, considering they pummeled South Carolina on its home floor in late February. I felt like with a game like that probably earned them a number one seed. They win their conference. That should have carried some kind of weight. I don't know why they seeded Texas above them, but again, that's one where I think underseeding them probably is the biggest mistake that the NCAA could have made, and might be the biggest thing that helps the Huskies make that deep run and probably get back to a Final Four, because I really can see them getting there and making some noise again. That team they really have rebuilt themselves. Paige Becker's All-American, probably National Player of the Year, possibly National Player of the Year. She's healthy and she can get them there. So I was trying to think of the other player, Az Fudd.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, they've got that 1-2 punch that they need. And daggone well, Gino is probably ticked off and really telling them they think of you as a number two seed. Prove them wrong.
And I also think that committee cost themselves of a dream matchup, which would be a ratings bonanza for the Final Four, which could have been UConn, USC.
Yeah.
And by putting
Yeah.
them in the same region, they'll probably meet up in the regional final. That's the only way they could meet up. I still think it'd be a great game, but that would be a great Final Four game. Uh, Gary, break it down for me, man. How far does UCLA go? Does South Carolina repeat? Does Van Schaefer do something with this Texas team? Talk to me. Give it to me in a
Oh,
synopsis.
okay. I'll start with UCLA. Having watched them in both of those previous games against USC, they lost both of the regular season games in February. And I remember thinking, particularly after the second meeting, that while they lost, that it was a game where you saw their size really become a factor. They missed shots at key points, and that's what USC really took advantage of. They get a stop and then they come down and make a basket, and Juju Watkins, she does what she does when given a chance, and even in the championship game, she made a couple of plays down the stretch that made it kind of, I mean, that really kept that game close. But I really think that UCLA with that size inside, um, I think they're really built now and now they have it in their heads that they can, beat a team like a USC, which has been a nemesis to them. But they saw what they can do when they really assert themselves in the paint, and that region I think really sets up well for them to get to the Elite Eight and really get to the Final Four. South Carolina, I'm not real sure, because let's take into consideration some of their losses, John. They lost to UConn, big at home. They lost at Texas, big on the road. There's probably another loss that they had in there. Let's see.
UCLA.
UCLA. So you're talking about two other fellow number 1 seeds and a number 2 seed that they've lost to. Okay. Yes, they lost to the best teams, but in all 3 of those losses, they weren't exactly competitive. There was really little doubt. Maybe the SC game, that I think back on that, but it's not the same team, because of course last year, they had a Camila Cardoza in the post, and they had that presence there, and Malaysia Fulwiley, I think like we were talking about before, that she's that kind of player who can really create a lot on the offensive end. She can make a mistake, but like you said, it's a mistake of effort, as opposed to, say, just making a mistake for the sake of making a mistake. I forgot the term that you used. It's not the same team, but I think that they're still good enough that they can get to an Elite Eight final, just because it is Dawn Staley coaching that team. And I understand that she's unhappy that they weren't made the number 1 overall seed, but I go back to my original point, John, without trying to dominate this discussion. But UCLA won when they had to. They beat the best team, so right now they are the best team to be beaten. They are the team you go after.
I agree with you. Now, last team we talk about, you've already talked about Texas, talked about USC. Bring it home and tell me how far a Duke team and a Notre Dame team can go in this tournament.
Okay, I'll start with I'll start with Duke, because you're talking about two teams that could really upset the apple cart, so to speak. I don't think that's as country as they're not as country.
Some of the things that I would say.
Yeah. Okay. But Duke, I think, is really the most dangerous team right now, because winning the ACC beating Notre Dame, first of all, to get to the conference championship, and then coming back to beat NC State, I think is very, very impressive, and it says a lot about our DC homegirl, Kara Lawson, and what she's been able to do in her first coaching job. We're used to hearing her as an analyst before she became a coach, and she was, of course, very astute in her analysis, and I think her knowledge of the game has carried over to coaching and apparently recruiting, because they're a lot deeper than people think. They've got a strong backcourt. They've got a really good inside game. They play great defense, and to shut down a team like Notre Dame, like they did in the tournament, I think it really speaks to how they built from a point at midseason where they seemed good enough but just couldn't get over the hump. Notre Dame, on the other hand, was a team that 3 weeks ago, John, I had in the Final Four. Now I'm not so sure because they've just had some head scratching losses and they've just seemed kind of, I don't know, just kind of lethargic down this stretch. In the ACC tournament, from what I saw, they were a team that I think was kind of perplexed and flummoxed by what Duke was doing. And what's that saying? It's hard to beat a team. It's hard to sweep a team, but it's hard to beat them 3 times in a season. And I think that was the case. I hope Notre Dame can really figure it out because they just have too much going on not to. Between Hannah Hidalgo, Olivia Miles, and the post player whose name just slipped my
Don't
mind.
forget about Citron. Young lady can
Yeah, that's right.
shoot
Yeah,
the lights out.
yeah, that's the one I was trying to remember. That when they put it all together, they are really hard to beat, and
Mhm.
I mean they're disruptive on the defensive end thanks to Hidalgo. They got essentially 2 point guards who can shoot in Hidalgo and Miles. And again, they've got an inside presence, but they've got to really get over themselves and you really handle the teams that they're supposed to. And again, go back to that kind of team, that can beat a UConn or give a team like South Carolina a game. And that's about all I can really say about them. They just got to get over themselves.
Gary, as always, the time goes so fast. You did a great breakdown for not only the men but also the women's, both brackets, men's and women's. You did a great breakdown. It's going to be an exciting tournament on both sides. I can't wait to watch what's getting ready to happen. Gary, take us home, man.
All right, 2 things. One, I got to give a shout out first to my Largo High School Lions who won their second straight Maryland AA championship. I got to give a shout out to George Mason's women for making the tournament, who were led by a Largo alumna, Vanessa Blair, who was on their great teams. And of course, the other local team from the area, the American University Eagles. Congratulations for making the big dance. I think their first round matches against Mount St. Mary's. Is that
Yep.
correct?
Yep. Tuesday night.
Yep. So, I mean, granted, it's a playing game, but that should be good. It should be great because we know about Mount St. Mary's all those years, and it's good to see them. So, in essence, we've got a local matchup, or at least a regional matchup, which, of course, is what makes March Madness what it is. And if either one of them won that, and I'd love to see the American Eagles, for what it's worth, win a game like that because Dwayne Simpkins, former Maryland player, coach of the AU Eagles. I couldn't be more proud.
Gary, you said a mouthful, and I see on your hat the Maryland Terps. I hope everything works out for them. We didn't get a chance to talk about them on the women's side. They got Norfolk State. They are a 4 seed. We'll see how far they go. We'll see how it works out with them. They got the biggest fan, Sharon DeBerry. She'll probably be heading to the game on Saturday to root them on. So,
Oh, that's right. That's the home game.
that's
Yeah.
a home game. They're right in College Park. So we'll see how that works out. Everybody, thank you for joining us this week. Another exciting week in sports. Normally, I tell you to watch some hockey, watch some soccer, watch some basketball, watch the NBA. This week, I just want you to watch the NCAA tournament. I just want you to have some madness of March with me. Enjoy yourselves, take care, and we'll see you again real soon.